I call to order the March 11th, 2020 business meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We welcome everyone and request everyone in the audience to please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Mrs. Bates? Ms. Bolton?
Present.
Mrs. Bowers? Mr. Lindy?
Here.
Mr. Messer?
Here.
Mr. Morosky? President Jones?
Here. Well, it's actually the first time since I've been here that we've had 3 people absent or late. I do believe maybe we have one more board member who we believe is coming. She just might be running late. These 4 o'clock times are a little hard for her. Okay. All righty. Well, Ms. Bowers isn't here to give the Student Achievement Committee report. Is there, Mr. Messer, are you able to give that report on her behalf?
I will.
It's here. Here you want. This is the revised.
Okay. I'm happy to give the Student Achievement Report out. The first topic was we had Justin Leach come present to us, which, as I always say, we all leave smarter after having him visit us, and talked about the SCPP test, and specifically talking about the execution of that test electronically or in written form. And I must say that as kind of we got into it, based on things that I've read about technology, et cetera, and we've got to get kids back to reading and writing and all these types of things, I thought we were going to go into this discussion and have a recommendation that we don't use an electronic testing tool and that we use the written. And I must say the data was compelling that we switched last year to do the written. The data was so compelling to switch back to the electronic. And I think as a parent and of course the school board member, it was fascinating to see specifically why. Of course, the results in the actual test, the test results led you there, but then in getting the additional background, just the way that the format of the test is set up electronically, the student can see often what they're reading immediately to the right on the screen versus having to flip through a large workbook or manual, which can take time, and also just the time to handwrite answers versus being able to type led to some incompletion as well. So the board absolutely supported the recommendation, the committee supported the recommendation of Mr. Leach and the team. I think the one thing that, as you'll see in the notes, I called out very specifically, just looking at the eligibility drop in the minority groups, and the team said they would go and look further into that and try to look at what might be some of the root cause, but overall, I think it was a little concerning that the minority success rate on this test seemed to be dropping since the previous time, disproportionately to the entire group. Let's see here. We did have a presentation from Camp Joy, which, you know, I think kind of what we talked about was, it was a nice presentation, but it once again is maybe an opportunity for us to learn on what sort of presentations come to our committees, because, you know, this one came because one of our board members was on their board and said, hey, why don't you come present? And so it didn't necessarily have a specific purpose, we could have had any number of 100 probably partners that we have come in and do presentations. So we talked about how we decide which of those presentations actually make its way to the agenda. But I will say one positive thing that came from that was Camp Joy did put up on a screen the number of schools and the specific schools that they worked with. And I made the point that some of those schools look like some of the usual suspects. And then I called out examples like LEAP and others that didn't make that list and often aren't on the list of some of these partners. So that was a good opportunity to talk about how we look at these opportunities that are available to our students and then look more holistically across the district to ensure equity. I think there was a mention of an outdoor type working group that might have been forming that I think Ms. Bolton at least had some awareness of some of that. And I think that was great, an excellent way to start to put people together that are working in that space, because I'm hearing a whole lot of that. What are you doing to get kids outside? What are we doing to get kids in nature? But what would I think be helpful is to have somebody working with that group from the administration who can then say, great, now we have all these. How do we make sure that all of these opportunities are made available to all the resource coordinators, all the principals, et cetera, to ensure equity and opportunity. And that being said, Camp Joy said we are absolutely more than happy to work with some of the other schools with some of the additional funding if it was schools that didn't necessarily have the same resource maybe as other schools did. So those were kind of our major topics, and then we went through the Student Achievement Committee work plan and really simplified it to mirror directly with the components of the strategic plan that I think we as a board kind of agreed to how these things would fit together. And so it really kind of helped streamline not just what was in the work plan, but then how we approach the work going forward. So there will be specific topics throughout the year as you see the calendar that are per the strategic plan, but then there are also a variety of other things that just have to be done per state protocol, et cetera. So you'll see in the actual months the topics and then 1A, 1C, et cetera, as it relates directly to this strategic plan, which I think we all can agree is going to help make things work really well. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, and I present the student achievement minutes as written.
Thank you. Ms. Bowers is here. You want to add to your
I
report?
apologize for my tardiness. I was
okay.
turned around. Okay, I didn't know if Board Member Messer mentioned the couple of assignments that we were bringing to the board, recommended assignments from the student achievement. One assignment was the committee is recommending that the board, I guess, vote or decide on the continuing or reinstating online testing based on a presentation by Mr. Leach. And the other one was recommended that Deputy Superintendent Amat provide an overview about the program regarding Camp Joy. We're going to kind of send things to you to kind of decide where they need to land. As Ryan has explained, some things are coming to student achievement that really need to go through administration and leadership team. And then the third one was the committee is recommending that the board approve that we want to take out or send back student attendance and student code of conduct to health and safety. And the rationale around that is it was expressed that student attendant falls up under the school social workers, which technically are up under health and safety, and that the student code of conduct falls up under positive behavior intervention supports, PBIS, which is also up under health and safety. And then we kind of talked a little bit about that in ad hoc as far as in the bylaws, where that lands to. And that was an agreement with our ad hoc committee was mutual that we thought that those should go back. So those were the three recommendations that we're bringing to the board for decision.
Okay, questions? Ms. Bolton?
Just a question about the online testing. Does that mean everyone, or are we not making any accommodations?
Accommodations, as Superintendent Amat has explained, will be made for those with IEPs, 504s. They can decide on paper or online, and I think it's just for third grade reading. Is that correct? Math is still going to be online. And Justin Leach explained some of the differences and benefits of doing online versus paper, how our scores looked in the writing because of the not legible enough to read. Some of the answers were not scored correctly as they did last year. It was a higher number of students that scored better than this year, especially in the writing. And then there was something with the state's decision about a cut score of 17 on online. It was put into the proficient, but in the paper part, it was put into basic, the same score, and he could not explain the rationale for that. So it made our scores look not as proficient with the writing. And so it's really going back to online, because I think that a couple years ago we were online, and then every year we get to evaluate how that's going, if we want to continue, if we want to switch. I think that was the option that we had as a board.
Go ahead.
As I recall, one of the reasons we moved to where it was not online, or at least there was a mix, was that there was a significant difference among them between our students that had more access to technology. Has that over time dissipated, or?
Yeah, so I'm not really sure that that was the reason that we moved to the paper pencil version. I think the conversation took place in EIP that kids may be a little bit more comfortable in the paper pencil version, and so we tested that theory, and we believe that, quite honestly, going back to the computer test is better. The kids are really supposed to have access and have exposure to keyboarding skills starting in kindergarten. And so that, quite honestly, I think our kids are really up to speed in terms of being very comfortable with using the technology, probably more comfortable than we anticipated.
Okay.
You have another question?
Not about that, I just disagree with it, but it's
Okay.
not a problem.
Can I ask a question along
About that
these
one?
lines? Yeah, and then we'll come
And then
back.
if you come back, thank you.
I'm really confused. So what we're talking about is, what's the name of the test? Iowa versus what?
So right now, we're talking about the third grade reading assessment test that identifies whether or not a student is promoted to fourth grade.
Gotcha,
So
okay.
many years ago, all of our tests were paper pencil assessments. And
Gotcha.
then we, according to the state, we had to move to online assessments. At that time, we began using Sarah. Tell me the software or the application we started using for typing. EasyTech, thank you.
Okay.
EasyTech was integrated into the curriculum starting at kindergarten so that students would have access to keyboarding skills and muscle memory. And so we went through the online version. Then the state offered the opportunity for us to go back to a paper pencil version, and so we tested that, and our students did not perform as well, and so we would like to go back to an online version. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, thank you.
So let me follow, because I'm on the previous topic, but it may have some commonalities for me. Regarding the SCPP test, that last paragraph, Mr. Messer expressed concern about the eligibility drop in minority groups. And then it goes on to say there was a discussion about the overall bias, and then it says, we're working on making sure that all CPS students have access to a rigorous education. That's pretty vague. So my question is it demonstrating that there is an eligibility drop in minority groups? Are we monitoring that so we know that for sure? And what are we doing anything? I mean, what concrete steps are we taking to ensure that that doesn't happen? Okay.
cultural bias comment, it's around standardized testing in general, not that particular test. So, and that's a national kind of norm when you're using a standardized test. The particular test that was used last year was recently normed and a lot more rigorous. So we talked about strengthening our Tier 1 curriculum. Part of today's presentation is adopting a math curriculum. So that is aligned to the standards, because it's really kind of an achievement standard-based test.
Okay, all right, can I phrase the question differently? I hear
Yes.
you. So compared to the old Walnut Hills test, this is new. We are seeing fewer minority students become eligible to enter because of this test, the new process.
Yes, however, there was a portion of the kids that we could not identify. So it was a little over 100 kids that we did not know their racial background on as well.
So it's definitely something that we'll look at so that we can make sure that all of our students have access to an education at Walnut Hills while still maintaining a high level of rigor.
Yes, and thank you, because I think that's an important aspect to follow up on. I can tell you, and I'm sure other board members might be able to tell you too, when we started getting calls from the public, from the community about it, most of the concerns were about minority kids not
students.
getting in. And that's an issue, I think, that we need to really give some attention to.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. Okay.
And I want to just make a comment about that test, because the question came up for me was the number of Title I school students who also have dropped, in addition to minorities. So that was a concern for us, and Deputy Superintendent spoke about the rigor, which is what I was going to ask about today when we got to the math curriculum, but, so that was a concern to us also.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm
Ms.,
capturing this as an
yes.
assignment.
I'm sorry.
I'm capturing this as an
Yes.
assignment.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Bolton.
As a follow-up for that, we all know the history of where it's been a number of years trying to make sure that children had access to Walnut Hills and that differences were recognized. And so is this on that particular topic, is that a comment on our capacity to get children ready? Or is it a comment on the test itself? So what happens to the children that didn't qualify, who we didn't get ready? Are they being denied admittance to Walnut Hills? And if they'd had a different test, would they have been able to get in? Have we, in this transition period, made those accommodations, or should we make accommodations? I'm just saying, having lived through these last many years, where it even required principal changes, not this time, this principal, but previous years past, where it was even understood at Walnut Hills that we want the diversity that makes it a great place. I'm just worried about that, but
Yeah, I think I think this is an assignment, and I think I would ask that the Student Achievement Committee keep it on their discussion radar to work through some of these, because I really believe we need to look at the data. I can't say whether it's an issue or not until we see actually what the data is telling us, but keep it on the agenda for discussion, all of the questions and things that have come up this evening about it, and we need to do a deeper dive into that.
I mean,
Okay.
that coupled about going back online and stuff, I think it's wonderful to push the rigor and push the skills, but that makes us obligated to provide the support. And that's the lesson of equity. But to maybe make something a little bit easier at least quicker, the topic regarding Camp Joy. I'm not familiar with that program, but I think an easy way to direct possibly the folks from Camp Joy would be to send them to Green Umbrella, because Green Umbrella has assumed much of the responsibility to facilitate this growing group of, I think they call it CPS Outside. And it started with those conversations, as Mr. Messer mentioned, between the park board and some school board members. This thing has now grown to almost 40 partners and is pretty exciting. But I think facilitating it would, an access point for Camp Joy would be Green Umbrella.
Okay. Ms. Bolton, did you get your other question? You had another question? Did
Yeah,
you get
it
that
was
addressed?
about
Okay.
the wallet test. And
Thank you.
I did add, I can see moving attendance to health and safety, even though that's the primary predictor of instructional success, is whether or not the children are there. So I could make a case that it would go to SAC, but the code of conduct, maybe the chairs of those two committees could talk to each other as to which parts would be best suited, because that has been a tremendous effort to make that a meaningful code of conduct. But I think that might be one of those shared responsibilities, possibly.
Right. I think, given what I heard about those assignments, since we are sort of going through a transition with our committees, there are going to be many times when we have that kind of crossover
Sure.
until we can kind of figure out. So it might be wise to have both committees deal with some aspects of it. Okay, so any other questions then about the Student Achievement Committee? I believe there is a recommendation. We want to move on to the next set of minutes, but I believe that with regard to the one assignment, that it's being given back to administration to give us the data on the test.
Okay, so which one? Which test?
The SCPP.
So, okay, but we do have another assignment about agreeing to the online, which is what we're presenting to the board.
Is that the third grade reading?
That's the third grade, yes, I'm sorry,
Yes.
yes.
Okay,
We do have that
all right.
for the board.
So, okay. So we'll leave that as is, that assignment as is. So when we go through the next and we approve the minutes, it'll be approved with the minutes. Okay. All righty. Mr. Messer, please present the March 6, 2020 ad hoc minutes, meeting report.
Okay, so did everyone get a copy to look at those changes? So I won't belabor the point, but, you know, what we tried to do is just clean things up a little bit more based on the feedback we had received up until that meeting. And, you know, my takeaway is it really is starting to make things much more clear, even though I've been on the board, I guess, now into my third year, believe it or not. Now I'm starting to figure out, as we've made some of these changes, how we're working various topics as they come to the board through our committees, et cetera, kind of how we're constructing our work plans, and it makes it, I think, much more specific and deliberate as we establish that new governance that operates kind of behind the scenes for the board here. So any questions on any of the changes? Both Pam and I were in that meeting.
Ms. Bolton?
I just need some clarification. I think, are we only voting today on the minutes from the last meeting? We're not voting on the complete protocol or bylaws right now? Just this,
Just
and then
any
we're
of the
gonna-
changes that we
Added.
updated in, you know, which
Okay,
I don't
and
think, you know, I think if there was one thing that we did talk about that was a question,
What's the growth?
was specific to the growth. Did you see that piece? And, you know, I think it was one that we could talk to both sides of it. You know, Melanie said, well, I think maybe what we should do is ask the superintendent, do you think about the money first and then you think about growth, or do you think about growth and then you figure out how to fund it? If it was the money first, she felt like, well, that should be finance. I felt that, you know, you would do your strategy and your plan, and then you would go say, all right, now how do we fund this? And so as it relates to student achievement, lots of things that I have been a part of, both here and in the community, is what should our growth plan look like? Should it be more Montessori? Should it be other options? Should part of our growth be career tech, et cetera? So it seemed like all of that potentially could be the student achievement work. And then once it gets to a point of kind of being specific to that strategy and that plan, it would then shoot to finance to look at how to fund that.
Ms., you.
Initially, this came up around when we talked about preschool needing to be in SAC, up under SAC. And that's where that came from. We talked about growth and how it ended up in finance. But that's where the initial discussion came from.
How did this discussion get in ad hoc?
Exactly.
Well, we were doing the bylaws. This was trying to make sure we aligned things to bylaws.
Which
I'm-
So this came to us.
Yes, Mr. Messer?
Yeah, it was because, you know, the idea is that then our committees then support our structure that's within the bylaws. And so as you look at that structure and what's included for each of our committees in the bylaws, we felt that we had to get that right before then the committees kind of address those individually.
Okay, I have a comment about that, but Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, couple things on that. I think it makes sense for, again, the whole board, if not just the committee's chairs, to talk about this. I think the initial ad hoc presentation, the minutes would indicate some months ago that growth was suggested to be put into finance. And I think I publicly said it shouldn't just be in finance. It probably is a whole board discussion, obviously. But I think we could talk about how we could divide those 4 strategies and goals up. None of them fit precisely in either of those 2 committees or the others. And matter of fact, there is nothing that is in the strategic plan that is a full section of finance. So that's why we were picking and choosing those things that related to financial planning and spending and revenue generating. So I think, I don't mind the comment here that it'll be discussed, and probably at the same time that we discuss the whole bylaws. I think that makes sense, but growth itself is a whole board effort, I think, as we've been living it, and I think some of the preliminary and some of the specific work that may be required could happen in any number of the committees. So I think leave this where it is, that it'll be discussed and perhaps discussed on March 16th. But I
Yeah.
do think, ironically, knowing that ad hoc initially kind of got started because there were claims of mission creep and too many things in one committee, I think ad hoc's getting to the point of doing a lot more than necessarily was assigned, although I do think this specifically was assigned to ad hoc. So, and I would hope that it lives out its life and is ended after the March 16th for those sorts of discussions to come back to the board.
Yeah, I would support having another discussion on the 16th to kind of finalize what we said bylaws, ad hoc's original charge was, and that was this, the bylaws protocols. I agree that the discussion on the growth, I think what we said is it is either full board discussion or that the chairs of the committee needed to come together and agree to balance out the workload. And so rather than have this as an assignment, I think there needs to be that discussion, which is outlined here somewhere, on the 16th about where that goes. So that not be an assignment, but we can move forward on that discussion about where they go. But the purpose, so what we will do, we will vote on the recording of the minutes, but we still, for March 16th, we need to put this on the agenda when board members are here so we can talk about this and put this to rest. Okay? Does that work for people? Yes. Ms. Bowers?
Regarding the additions or revisions, we're going to wait for the 16th for those also?
Let's do.
If it's in here, yes.
Okay.
If it's included in here, yes. This will go as one
Okay.
document, and we'll go through this and have a discussion and
Okay.
vote on approving this. Okay. Any other questions then? All right. Okay, I need a motion to approve the committee reports.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Great. All righty. I believe that we're at the item. Does anyone have any kudos before we go to hearing on the public?
I have one.
You have one?
Yes.
Mr. Lindy?
I had a chance to go to West High yesterday morning to hear a group of students present what they were calling a day of action for student pedestrian safety. And I thought that the kind of vision for the event and the passion that the kids showed was great. And I thought there were a number of elected officials and city representatives there and members of the police force. And I think that it is a special and powerful thing when the voices of kids and families provides direction for what matters. And I was excited about what I think that group can do over the course of the next couple of months. So kudos.
Great, thank you. Yes, Ms. Bolton?
I have a kudo for the superintendent and her leadership team, or performance team. I think in the midst of all the proper angst and concern regarding the epidemic that we are facing, and I think strong, decisive, yet steady and not panicked leadership has been a great model. And my hope is that other local leaders will follow that model, and that, again, it would seem, again, the third time in the last 2 days, I heard exactly the same sort of process and plan from the New York City superintendent and mayor, or region, or whatever they call him, but the mayor particularly, who is in charge of the schools. And it's the one by one, it's being cautious. And I feel the only thing that could have maybe been better was perhaps the staff of that particular building maybe could have heard a little bit earlier, but in that process, you also didn't want it to be out as general knowledge until all bases were covered. So I understand that, but I appreciate the whole leadership team and whoever else partnered with us to come to that decision.
Yes, I just want to add that I thought it was, that the communication was swift. We had talked about that, and it was immediate. Now, you know, we'll never get 100% folks who agree with what we're doing, but for the most part, I think what I've heard is that people really appreciated having the information. And they know that we're continuing to monitor it on a daily basis, so they know this is high priority for us. Ms. Bowers.
In addition, Carolyn and I were at the Ohio School Board Association Southwest Regional Spring Conference, and we were hearing all kind of accolades that CPS is ahead of the state.
That's right.
In prevention, and so accolades to you
Right.
for that. We're all
Exactly.
over the state.
Right.
In addition,
Big
I want to
dog.
give a
big
kudos to our
dog.
to our president, who had, we received an email from a community member acknowledging her leadership regarding the agreement with the city, and highlighted her strength and her perseverance through that and her presentation to the city. So I want to give kudos to our president for that.
Thank you. It really was a team, but you all don't know how well I hide my stress, so. Thanks. Okay, any other kudos? Mr. Lindy, would you present the retirements, please?
I will. I'm going to do my best. Melanie Bates, stand in. We have one retirement this evening, who is from Joetta Mason. This is a sign language interpreter retiring, and want to say thank you for your years of service to Cincinnati Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, we are now at the item on our agenda for hearing of the public. Each speaker has 3 minutes to speak, and Mrs. Wagner will be our timekeeper. When the buzzer goes off, your 3 minutes are up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel items. When your name is called, please come to the podium, the lower podium, to speak. We have 2 speakers tonight, so I'll call both names. Lisa Frenzel? Okay, and Ed Path. Come on down.
Okay. All right, thank you to the board and superintendent. My name is Lisa Frenzel, and I'd like to address the overcrowding issue at Pleasant Ridge Montessori. I have a second and fourth grader at PRM, and this is a school that was advocated for and championed by a dedicated group of parents and community members with a unique vision for a neighborhood Montessori school. PRM began as a beautiful school with large classrooms where students could spread out their Montessori works. Now enrollment growth has forced taking over any and all space for instructional use, with over 700 students in a building designed for 550. Gone is the science lab and school-based health clinic. ISS and staff lunchrooms are in former storage rooms with no windows. Copy machines are now in open hallways to use those spaces for reading and intervention specialists. Occupational therapy takes place in a converted locker room. My second grader spends his days in a room with no windows, no sink, having to use a bucket to dump out any liquid waste. You can imagine what that smells like after a while. There have been numerous proposals to address the issue, making PRM a magnet so enrollment can be capped, changing boundaries, building onto the back of the school, purchasing additional land to expand. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that I do not want PRM to become a magnet school. This school is part of the fabric of our community. Kids walk and bike to school, play sports with their schoolmates and neighbors, and school events are often community events. The latest I've heard from the board and Superintendent Mitchell is looking at an addition, either with or without adding on more land. Putting an addition on the back of the school would practically eliminate the already very small amount of outdoor play and learning space the school has. Lunch period already extends from 10 to 12:30. Adding classrooms without more cafeteria space should definitely not be an option. All of this while neighborhood magnet schools like Woodford and Silverton sit below capacity. There's an obvious desire for a neighborhood school like PRM and expanded capacity to meet the needs of all the communities currently being served by PRM is desperately needed. We need a decision and plan from the board. Our school is at a critical mass, and without action soon, what has been a model for what a neighborhood Montessori school can be will decline beyond repair. There's been an influx of families to this neighborhood because they want to send their kids to PRM. I ask that the board give parents, LSDMC, and the community a voice in the decision-making process. The future of our kids and our community is at stake, and we deserve a place at the table. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members,
Hello.
administration. As you recall, at the last board meeting, multiple Hyde Park school parents expressed concerns regarding their second graders crossing the street each day for class above the Eagle Savings Bank after they had a close call with a vehicle one afternoon. I'd like to thank everyone involved, as several parents at Hyde Park School met with school administrators and central office staff soon after to come up with ideas for improving this daily safety concern. Immediately and having the most impact, our crossing guard was added for the afternoon crossing. Members of the CPS security team have also helped with the crossings until our school resource officer can return from his medical leave. Having dedicated personnel there to help with the crossings is the best solution while we work toward a more permanent solution at the school. Additionally, the children and staff now have reflective safety vests, and there are a couple of high visibility flags in use as well. And now that those safety concerns have been improved, I'd like to turn focus back on the overall state of Hyde Park School. It was not included in the CPS facilities master plan. During the billion-dollar plan from 2004 through 2014, 16 school buildings were completely renovated and many more built. Kilgore was reopened in 2008 after undergoing a $14.9 million project, including a 23,630 square foot addition with 10 additional classrooms and a new gymnasium. Hartwell underwent a major renovation of $13.4 million. Dater Montessori, $17.4 million. Roselawn Condon, $12.4 million. And those are just the items I could find on a document from the CPS website for the year 2008. Hyde Park School is actually the oldest building in the district portfolio, the front half of the building, and is in desperate need of renovation to align with the other buildings throughout the district. There simply aren't enough classrooms in the building to provide the bare minimum in instruction space for a school with 550-plus students. The gym is severely undersized, as is the cafeteria, and the restrooms are sparse and often in disrepair. Regardless of what properties are acquired and what long-term plan is put in place for the entire east side, HPS requires immediate renovation to become a building suitable for 21st century education. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Superintendent Mitchell, please introduce the first presentation.
Yes. In alignment with our year-long focus of the implementation of the strategic plan, everyone is aware, the board is aware, as well as the administration, that we have been providing a presentation at every single one of our board meetings, giving an update. And so today's update is centered around the first goal, which is student-centered decision-making. And so I'd like to introduce Deputy Superintendent Tiani Amat to introduce the team that will give an update to the board pertaining to a math adoption selection. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
We are so excited to be here to present on the math curriculum adoption. It's been a several-month process, and today joins me Director of Curriculum, our math manager, and two wonderful teachers in the field. So they will talk about the process and give their recommendation at the end. So we'll start off with Emily Campbell.
Thank you, board members and Superintendent Mitchell and Treasurer Wagner. We are thrilled to be here today to recommend this adoption of our mathematics curriculum. Before we get to the what, we wanted to share why this is so important to us. As a department, we are committed to making sure all children, regardless of circumstances, have access to high-quality, on-grade level curriculum and instruction. The word all students is incredibly important for us to think about. Nationwide, 40% of college students report that they had to take at least one remedial course, learning skills that they were told they already mastered in high school. This number, 15,000, is the number of hours we have as our students travel from kindergarten through 12th grade. Therefore, materials matter. Materials matter in regards to equity and access. They can act as professional development for us, and they will absolutely strengthen our core. I want to introduce our adoption members. Tanya Relier and April Thompson are our two council chairs joining us today, and then Sean, Aaron, Crystal, Karen, Musa, Joelle, Tong, Denisa, Alexa, Akita, and Jennifer helped us build consensus this year. Building consensus in a district this size is difficult work. Leading with students first, ensuring equity and access brings us here today.
So what does equity and access mean to mathematics? Robert Berry, who is the current president of National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, states, teachers should have an appreciation of their students' cultures, understand the development of knowledge within students' cultural frameworks, recognize that the interpretation of information in mathematics happens when students' cultural and experiential frameworks and the lack of exposure to high-quality teaching and exposure to contact impacts their mathematics.
So these are our current adopted textbooks. We have Scott Forsman for elementary that's under current adoption, Discovering and Prentice Hall in high school. These were all adopted prior to the Common Core state standards, prior to the Ohio state standards. Because those were adopted prior to current standards, currently mathematics classrooms are working with supplemental resources They're working with Engage New York resources. Engage New York is all green on Ed Reports, so it is a good resource. And high schools are working with Desmos. Desmos provides lessons, an online calculator, but it's, again, a good resource. Here we go. And we'll talk about our must-haves.
The recent ELA adoption process was a learning curve for our curriculum department and a huge benefit for how we adopt curriculum now. To guide our math adoption as a committee, we created must-haves. All green on Ed reports and equip rubric aligned, continuous curriculum across K-5, 6th through 8th, and 9th through 12th grade bands, and responsive to varied student learning needs, and structured enough for our new teachers, but flexible enough for our experienced teacher. Uh-oh. Did I hit it wrong? Oh. Hit it over? Okay. Sorry. And for engagement, we agreed upon these must-haves with our mathematics council, and we sent out numerous surveys to capture the voice of our teachers through Google Forms, on Schoology, through email, and our curriculum councils played a great part in this, and we received their feedback throughout the school year. And we also held a curriculum fair inviting community, teachers, and other stakeholders.
All right, our timeline. We actually started last year. We actually created an adoption committee back in February and March of last year. That adoption committee started meeting in May of last year. In May, those teachers that were on the adoption committee started choosing the pilots that they would want in their classrooms. They were trained on the equip rubric that we used to evaluate materials last May. That way, in August of 2019, teachers started with pilot materials immediately at the beginning of the school year. Then in October, we had the community viewing event. Stakeholders like families, staff members, everybody was invited to come out and look at the curriculum that we were trying to decide upon, the curriculum that was being piloted in classrooms. And then in January, the adoption committee met and kind of solidified our recommendations and reviewed those based on our must-haves. And now we're here with a recommendation of materials. So we are recommending for K-5, Ready, published by Curriculum Associates. Our K-5 committee is really, really excited about the discourse that's encouraged by Ready. And they're excited about the online diagnostic that kids will take that will set them up with a personalized learning path so that teachers are more able to see where students are and how to meet their personal needs best. It's also set up for small group instruction, which is the way we want our elementary classrooms to run. Then in 6 to 8, we're recommending Envision, published by Pearson. We're also recommending Envision published by Pearson for Algebra 1, for Geometry, and Algebra 2. Those committees are really excited about the 3-act math tasks that are involved in the curriculum and the math modeling. We know we need to incorporate a lot more math modeling. Also, the Success Maker that comes with it is an online tool, an online diagnostic tool that teachers have been using this year to pilot and are excited about. It incorporates Desmos that teachers are enjoying using right now, and Math Excel that many of our high schools have been using and purchasing without a curriculum adoption. Let's see. There we go.
Before we talk about how do we know we're successful, I want to just, if everybody can go back one page to the 4 quadrants. And I just want you to please look at instructional methods and shifts. That's where each of these curriculum materials is focusing on the balance of rigor. So how will we know we are successful? Our students will begin to believe that they are mathematicians. We will increase student achievement and accelerate our student growth. We will decrease academic gaps in student achievement, as well as now we will have a continuity of mathematical learning across the district. Our implementation plan. We learned a lot from ELA adoption last year, so we are going to start our professional development early. We're going to start with spring break, as well as our June Curriculum Academy. We will have PD during the opening weeks for 2 full days, and we will have personalized support for our educators during the school year, as well as during release days. Our communication plan. We want to make sure that everyone is on the same page and has all the information so they can support our students. So we will have bi-weekly memos to our staff. We will have information in the curriculum instruction newsletter, as well as the principal newsletter. Also through our curriculum councils and Schoology, we will engage our families through robocall, social media, as well as parent centers in our schools.
So in closing, we really believe that this curriculum adoption is our next best step to ensuring all children, regardless of circumstances, have access to high-quality curriculum and instruction. Thank you.
Thank you. Do board members have questions or comments? Mr. Lindy.
Hi, thank you very much. This is very exciting. I was a social studies teacher and never, I felt, had quite the same, this was in a different state, but the same kinds of incredible resources you all are providing for math and English teachers. I was always a little jealous and wanted more of those for what we had. I wanted to ask just a couple of basic questions. And some of this is just being new and wanting to understand how all this works. Just in other experiences I've had, I know that curriculum can include lots of different kinds of things. And I was, 3 sets of things I was thinking of. One around assessments to use, whether that's, beginning, middle, end of year, or, paced interim assessments. Category 1, category 2, pacing guides for teachers. And then category 3, even at the level of daily lesson plans. And what I'm not trying to imply is that there's any kind of should in this question anywhere. I'm just curious. I think you could have reasonable, strategies for why you would want some of those, but not others. I'm just trying to understand in the proposed math curriculum, of those sets of things, what's included. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we really worked to segment and make sure that these 4 components were readily available and easy to use for our teachers. And we're currently, if you vote approval for this adoption, we will draft curriculum maps and guides, which lay out a scope and sequence of when the vendors are and how much time vendors believe it should take for each unit, but we do market it as a draft because it is it will be going into our first year of implementation, and we'll need to really learn how much time needs to go. In regards to assessments, we identified that under the measurement category, and so our READY curriculum has the formative and summative assessments, they have the unit assessments, they have the diagnostic, as Ms. Relier referenced. Pearson also has diagnostic tests, I should say assessments, formative and summative. What's great about Pearson, the success maker that Ms. Relier also referenced, is a assessment component in our ELA curriculum that currently our teachers are really using and appreciating to figure out where their students are.
That's great.
And what they need to do.
And on the daily lesson plan piece, that's something that is included or not included?
Do you want to speak about the daily lesson plans either? Yes, yes, yes. I mean,
Okay.
they're included, yes.
And then I think the last part, thank you for the time, was I'm not sure how we do this here. I've seen some districts where here's all these resources you just described, and they're required. So everyone use them, use exactly these, do not deviate. I've seen other contexts where it's, you know, here you are, use them if they are helpful. What approach do we take?
So we take the approach of we want to learn, and these are, once we adopt, these are our adopted core curriculum and instruction resource. But in our first year, we want to get really good at the planning, the practicing the lesson, and then the reflecting on how did it go, where would we want to tweak. And we want to do that as a collaborative group of individuals. We try not to go in with, you should be doing this, but instead with the approach of what are you testing and learning with the new curriculum, and how can we support you? Do you want to say anything more about that?
Once we get through that first year, it's a district-adopted curriculum, and it's expected that teachers use the district-adopted curriculum.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bowers?
Yes, thank you for the presentation. This is very detailed. The part about communication and ongoing information for parents. I always have heard about the new math and how parents have difficulties helping support their students with math because of the way it's taught, the way that it's presented. And I see that, you know, there are robocalls, parent. How are we going to include parents in being able to assist their children with homework?
Dr. Donovan?
So one of the things we're really focused on is parents, and as you said, because it looks like new math. We have our math specialists in our building. We will send out newsletters to parents with your son or daughter learned this today, these are some things you can help them with. This is what it looks like. And we will send robocalls, and we'll be open if you will have through Schoology, if you have questions, how can I help my son or daughter in the evening? And even with the parent displays in the schools, we can possibly have some workshops to really help those parents who want to come in.
That'll be good. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Ms. Bolton,
Not surprisingly, I have a couple.
the teacher.
And also, and as well as some information. Everybody knows in curriculum, I think it is the secret weapon. I think it is the most important thing we actually do to improve instruction and achievement. So I'm glad you're here. I liked, as I tried to understand, I'm not, like Mr. Lindy, we're social studies people, so I tried to figure out some of the things that I would understand as part of it. I liked the sections that had advanced concepts. I thought that that would be great for teachers and collaboration, just to even figure out what they know together or separately. And I like particularly the applications in some of these where this is why you learn this math, which will lead into something I want to say that I learned in Columbus last week. Do we know what other districts use these vendors in particular? And we're confident in what they look like? You know, I don't need to know who they are, just that we kind of research that to see what their success was?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. And then there seemed to be a lot of good connections between the grades and among the grades. There seemed to be a nice thread to that. And to Mrs. Bauer's point, even in the district-wide LSDMC meeting, one of the groups came back with, you know, how can we help our kids and how could you, as a district, help us? Part of it was wanting parent academies, kind of especially for math, because the children across all grade levels and all economic status all were, you know, very confused as to how to help because there's different ways. So I think that might be an interesting thing to start to pilot a little bit, where you might have some parent academies helping parents do this. We don't yet know the cost, or do we? Is that going to be in a later report when we're focusing?
It would be included in the budget request.
Okay, all right. But you want us to adopt this, not knowing how much it's going to cost?
It's approximately $4 million for the entire district, which might sound like a lot of money, but when you consider this covers K-12,
Right.
over 36,000 students, it isn't really a huge investment.
It's great. And those are the kinds of numbers that public needs to know, that when you spread it, as you've pointed out any number of times, when you spread it across the district and across the number of students. And then I noticed this was the core curriculum, but it would be great to have a list of what electives in math also appear in the district, just as information for the board. The piece of information I have is that, as some may know, I'm on the Education Standards Board, and we had every other month a meeting or so for 2 days. And on Friday, it was presented to the Education Standards Board that the Ohio Department of Ed, you probably know this, but it was a surprise to me. The Ohio Department of Education has hired an education strategy group, the Charles A. Dana Center, about an Ohio mathematics initiative, where and if we don't know about it, it's surprising. Apparently, it was pretty new to the ODE people that weren't directly involved, but it's the recognition that the legal requirement that our students do well in Algebra 2. The law says Algebra 2 or its equivalent, and nobody's really been able to figure out the equivalence, but this group, and I can share this information with the superintendent, again, I just got it on Friday, and it was really exciting. It's even, I guess, the business community has recognized that the demand to rigor up to Algebra 2 is not being successful for all students, and that they are creating in this group, and they're allowing districts to pilot some of this next year if they choose to, but it's trying to connect the kinds of math that is needed for particular employment or particular majors in college, so that all of our students have an opportunity to have things that are maybe more relevant to what they're going to need. And it's not that it's getting away from the rigor as much as it is saying these are the skills that are needed. And so they are developing new math courses that might be developed. So it might be interesting. I can put the superintendent in touch with this group, but I think it answers some of our needs. I mean, we've been aiming high as early as anybody on the Algebra 2, but again, recognizing the equity piece and recognizing the workforce development. Somebody's trying to figure this out both at the university level and the ODE level, and then this other group that's, I think, being paid to do this. So it might be real exciting for us and for our kids, especially if we have an opportunity to pilot. And when I said, oh, well, we're getting ready to adopt something like tomorrow, basically they asked about it and and I mentioned the vendors, and these people said they were very wonderful vendors and that they'd be very interested in working with CPS, and is excited that we do a kind of an in-house curriculum development. So we look good, but this is exciting because I know how taxing the whole Algebra 2 piece has been for our families and children.
Thank you.
Ms. Bowers.
Yes, I just want to clarify. You guys feel that this curriculum is beginning the rigor toward what our kids need to perform at a higher level?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right.
And any other questions or comments? Yes.
Yeah, I think tying it to the discussion earlier about the quote-unquote Walnut Hills test is, and I think this is the answer that meant so much to me, was, yes, a new test is rigorous, and we have to make sure that our curriculum matches that. And we've upgraded our curriculum almost kind of across the board just since I've joined the school board. So it's nice to see this kind of cap on already what's been a really strong journey in us upgrading curriculum kind of across the whole district. So thank you for that.
Thank you again for the presentation. We have the condensed version of the presentation. We have the big book. So just a reminder to board members that that's also a good reference. I did try to understand it, but this was much more helpful to me. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so moving on to board matters, and this subject is going to be quick and easy. If folks could pull out their schedules and see if April 1st, which is a Wednesday, is available, and administration too. April 1st, 6:30. And I'm asking that because I've been in contact with Father Graham, and we talked about scheduling our first joint meeting. He's going to be out of town a lot over the next couple of months, so we just picked that time as one that we knew was a strong possibility. If that doesn't work for people, then we have to look for another time. And it will probably be later in April, but we're trying to get it on. We're actually late in doing this. So April 1st, what does that look like? Yes, Mr. Messer?
Yeah, I know we had a board meeting already on for that date, but I will be out that week as it's my older son's spring break, so
Okay.
I'll be out that whole week.
All right, and that's a regular board meeting. And I didn't have that on my, it is at 4?
Yeah.
Okay. The budget hearing? But, okay. Is, the board meeting is the budget hearing. Is there a regular board meeting that evening?
It's 4 o'clock, 4 to 6.
Okay,
It's
all right, then that day won't work. That day won't work. So here's what I'm going to do. We don't have to talk about it tonight. It would be nice. Maybe in assignments, I'll just give an assignment for board members to look at their calendars and give some potential dates to Phyllis or Pat, and also subjects, topics for discussion. Usually, yes. Right. Okay.
We don't have a meeting the following week.
What's the following week? The 8th?
The 6th, there's no.
8th?
Yeah, there's
8th is a Wednesday.
Wednesday's the 6th. I mean, yeah, the 8th. Right.
Okay, look at the 8th.
8th.
8th? I'm sorry, you're available? Available? Okay. Why don't we shoot for the 8th?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we'll do is just, I'll get back to Father Graham and ask him to check with his members about April the 8th. And then what we'll do is ask everybody to, if you have any ideas or thoughts about an agenda, the agenda topics, please send them to Phyllis, and Father Graham and I usually get together and sort of prioritize and align an agenda that makes sense for us. Okay? Anything else related to that subject? All right. Superintendent Mitchell, do you have a report?
I do. I have a report in addition to the written report. And so I'd like to provide to you this evening an update as to our plan as it relates to the coronavirus. So what I have included for you at your, in front of you are 2 documents. One is a memo or a letter to our staff members. And what I'm going to talk about is really captured in summary in this letter. And then there's also a question and fact sheet that I have attached to that as well. I will try to make this as quick but as thorough as possible. All right, so we are extremely passionate about this, meaning the entire CPS administration and teachers, because safety is our primary priority in terms of thinking about our work instructionally and also in terms of the strategic plan. We have to make sure that our kids and our staff members and everyone who enters our building, they're safe. So if I had to say there were 3 key messages around this work, it is we have a plan, we're executing and adjusting that plan as information changes, and honestly, it changes sometimes on an hour-by-hour basis. And our 3rd key message is to be calm and deliberate about our work. So let me provide you some general information. I would also like to say, before I get into the general information, several members of the administration had the opportunity to attend a briefing that was given at Duke Energy Center yesterday at 1 o'clock. It was sponsored by the city manager, the mayor, the police chief, the fire chief, a doctor from UC Health, as well as the health commissioner. And so here's some information based upon that meeting and the work that we've been doing. So we know that this virus, also called COVID-19, is a respiratory virus. It was first identified or detected this strand in December of 2019. It has an incubation period of from anywhere to 2 to 14 days to 28 days. The symptoms include fever, cough, shortness of breath, and the potential to transmit from person to person is very high. So how does CPS stay informed about the work that's happening and the information? So the CDC provides daily updates to the Cincinnati Health Department. Cincinnati Public Schools, we have a team that is dedicated to work with the health department, and we have huddle calls twice a week that are related to the information that the health department is getting from the CDC. So we get a report 2 times a week. We know as of March 11th, about 2 hours ago, there are 4 confirmed cases in the state of Ohio, none of which are in Hamilton County. We know that there are 24 people who are currently under investigation and 21 have tested negative, and that we have 255 cumulative numbers that are under health supervision at this time. And I'll say again, we do not have any identified confirmed cases in Cincinnati. I did also place at your seating, though, a document that outlines the fact that the mayor has claimed a state of emergency for the city of Cincinnati. We're not exactly sure what that means at this moment. Although we do not have any confirmed cases in Cincinnati, we are in constant contact with Dr. Melba Moore, who is the health commissioner. I have talked to her every day since Friday, many times, several times a day, one night as late as midnight. And so she has been extremely available through text messaging, through emails, and through phone calls. I spoke with her about 3 hours ago before coming to this meeting to get some additional guidance. So we are in constant communication with the health department and working very closely with them. So here are the recommendations that the health department, this is what their recommendations are in terms of limiting the spread of this virus. Frequent hand washing with warm water, rubbing your hands with soap to the count of 20, covering your mouth and your nose when you sneeze or cough. The piece that has recently been added is to cough into a tissue, not just your arm. And so that is the way it was indicated yesterday through the meeting we attended that this virus is transmitted through droplets that come from your nose or your mouth. They're not sure how small of a droplet is needed to actually transfer the virus. We were also told by the physician at who is with UC Health that the virus will live on a surface for 2 hours. And so we are obviously very concerned about constantly cleaning all surfaces to make sure that they are clean. The 4th thing that they are recommending is to clean and sanitize high-touch areas or surfaces, and then stay home if you have a fever or if you aren't feeling well. Now, there is a tendency for people to become hysterical and to say that they're going to self-quarantine. Seeking medical advice from a healthcare professional is necessary to determine whether or not you should self-quarantine. So according to the definition from the health department, because I have a cough, I can't all of a sudden say, now I'm just going to self-quarantine myself. You have to talk with a healthcare professional to know whether or not you should be self-quarantined. So what's the CPS plan? So we are working under 3 major areas in this work in terms of preparation, execution, and then recovery. And recovery is there in the event that something tragic happens. How do we bounce back and recover from that situation? And so at this present moment, our plan includes 13 major areas, and you can see those areas identified as facilities, travel, field trips, personal travel, partners, attendance of our staff and students, school closure, transportation, communication, school-specific information, athletics, and extracurricular, distance learning, and communication. And I'm going to very quickly go through each one of those areas. And again, this is all outlined in that one-page letter that I gave you. I use that as the outline and then created the PowerPoint slides. So in terms of facilities, our building engineers have been working hard to really clean our buildings, to do deep cleaning, and to make sure that our buildings are clean. I will say this, that it cannot just be left up to our janitors and our custodial staff to be responsible for cleaning surfaces. And so are we asking for our staff members in terms of our teachers and our other staff members in our buildings to become people who clean? To some extent we are, and let me say why. A janitor or a custodian will not be able to come by every single classroom every 2 hours and wipe everything down. And so we will do cleaning, but it will become very important for everyone in the building to really make sure that they are also cleaning those high-touch surfaces. So doorknobs, tabletops, and keyboards after they've been used. And so it's just incumbent upon all of us to take this seriously, not only within our schools, but also within our work sites in terms of our offices. The information that I found out just before coming to this meeting, we ordered a large supply of cleaning materials, hand sanitizer, Clorox wipes, disinfectant sprays for our teachers to be able to use and other support staff within our buildings. And our order has been, it has been sent and transferred to hospitals. It's been diverted. And so this slide is actually outdated now. And so, as I said, things are changing on a very, very rapidly. And so you probably have seen sometimes pictures of grocery store shelves that are cleaned out of Clorox and wipes. And so we thought that we had gone around that by ordering direct, but our order has been diverted somewhere else. And so we're now looking to see where we may be able to place an order to get materials for our people to be able to clean. In terms of travel, and travel has been a large issue because we have a list of our schools who had planned to have international as well as domestic travel throughout the spring, and we are postponing and suspending all domestic and international travel. We have made this decision in alignment with thinking about places where our children were scheduled to go that might be under level 2 through 3 through 4 in terms of on the CDC's watch list. We have kids who are scheduled to go to Germany and Italy and the Philippines and China, and so all over the place. And in some instances, our young people were scheduled to go to a place that's not considered a watch zone, but they had to transfer through a city that is a watch zone or a country. And so we are really taking a very cautious and proactive approach to say that we are going to suspend travel. Our legal counsel has been working with the coordinators of these travel excursions to be able to get as much money as we possibly can back, because obviously many times kids raised money and families are out of money in terms of being able to pay for these excursions. And so we're very carefully working with that. We know that Clark has been working to be able to get some money back, and it looks like the trip that was scheduled for the Philippines, and I don't want to speak out of turn, I want to make sure what I'm saying is correct. The coordinator has been able to get all of it back except for $1,000, roughly in that area. We are continuing to allow in-state field trips, but we are monitoring those very closely, and in-state field trips will have to be approved by the performance leadership team, and we're putting this measure in place because we are the ones who are getting up-to-date information, sometimes on an hourly basis, to know whether or not this is a trip that our kids should take. We are also following in alignment with the CDC as well as the health department as well as the governor to really consider discontinuing events of 50 or more people. So that is coming straight out of the governor's office to eliminate 50 or more people getting together. And so quite honestly, that will make us rethink some of our choices as it relates to field trips. Field trips like the Museum Center, COSI, those are trips that encourage people to touch everything. And I'm not sure if someone is going around continuously to wipe everything down. And so we'll be making this decision on a case-by-case basis based upon the information we're gathering. Personal travel, obviously we cannot limit personal travel, but we are asking people and directing them to the CDC's travel guidelines. And we are also asking any of our employees who have recently traveled or are planning to travel to contact their supervisors so they are aware of where you have been or where you plan to go so that we can see what the risk factor is for that region. For our partners, we'll provide the information that we're providing for our staff members. If our partners have additional information, we have been instructed to steer them toward the Cincinnati Health Department, and here's the phone number. And the commissioner has been extremely cognizant of getting information back to us as fast as possible. In terms of attendance, we are monitoring centrally the attendance of our staff members as well as our students. We're actually able to pull that information centrally through Power School for our students in terms of attendance. And HR has the capability through Business Plus to be able to pull our staff attendance. So we're going to have reports every day. We will give those reports to Cynthia Ibalnia, who will then communicate that information. If there's a significant number of students or staff members who are absent from a particular school, that information will go directly to the health department. Possible school closure. It is a possibility at this point in time. The health commissioner is not recommending that we close school. We do not have any documented confirmed cases of the virus in Cincinnati. Should we have to close school, then we have actually a school closure process with a swim lane that we will execute, and we also will have curriculum for students to be able to have access to in written form, so packets, 8 weeks of lessons, and I'll get to that in a couple moments, as well as some digital curriculum that kids will have access to. So we are reactivating our pandemic plan. It is being updated, and we should have it tomorrow morning to be able to give that information out. In terms of transportation, we have been in communication with all of our bus vendors, our yellow bus vendors, as well as Metro. And so you can see that they are taking measures to disinfect and to clean the buses as our students are using them, especially obviously in those high-touch surfaces within a bus. Athletics and extracurricular, we have been advised by the Ohio Athletic Association to prohibit spectators, with the exception of parents, at sporting events. I have been told, but have not yet confirmed, that players will be given 4 tickets in which to give for their parents and family members to be able to attend sporting events. We are also being advised by the governor to not host events of more than 50 people, so for extracurricular. In terms of distance learning, the curriculum department has been working to develop packets by grade level that will be copied and can be sent home with kids. Obviously, if we have a notice ahead of time of kids leaving school, that we can get the package to them, that we know the school will be closed. In the instance of AWL, we did not know the day before. We made the decision late one evening to close that school, so we'll have packets. But we'll also have information in terms of digital curriculum if parents have the access in terms of computers as well as Wi-Fi. We'll be providing information digitally through Schoology, and we already know that our 4th through 12th grade students can actually work on their LINK project, which is, how does a community best prevent the spread of communicable diseases? Never waste a crisis. Here's some other tools that we're putting in place. We're taking into account our students with disabilities, making sure that we have supports in place for them, whether we're talking about our STRIDES units or MD units or our autism units. We'll be providing supports and lessons for our students who speak English as a second language as well. And we have some information for our families in terms of designating places for kids to work, opportunities for them to get some exercise in, taking some breaks, and accessing the library through a library card or digital access. So all this information will be on our website to provide for families and for our staff members. In terms of specifically AWL, so to be very transparent, AWL was closed on March the 10th because a staff member went to a hospital and requested a test be conducted. That information was then sent from the hospital to Cincinnati Public Schools, identifying that this person is going to be under a self-quarantine. So at that point in time, we discussed this, our PLT discussed this on a Blue Jeans call one evening on March the 9th, talked with the health commissioner and decided to close that school so that we could do some deep cleaning for the next day. And so that's what we did yesterday. We decided also to close today to make sure that the school was very clean. In addition, though, we were hoping to be able to get back the results from the test, and I talked with the commissioner today, and she still doesn't have the test results back. What is happening in some instances in some states or cities, people are going to their healthcare provider and saying, I want to be tested, which is clogging the system in terms of being able to provide the test for people who actually may be sick. And so that's why we're saying, before you self-quarantine, please consult with a healthcare provider first. The buses are clean, the school is clean. We have not had any other reports of anyone who has been sick to the point that they have contacted a physician and they need to be under self-quarantine. And so we will resume school tomorrow. So it will be open tomorrow. And this is at the advice of the health department. Again, I can't express enough that it is all of our responsibilities to make sure that we're cleaning surfaces all throughout the day, all of those high-touch areas. In terms of communication, our communication started back in January when we started communicating with our staff members about flu season. We then also sent some additional information home with our kids on February 7th to our parents. We did a memo to all staff members early March, a robocall to families and to staff members on March the 6th, a letter to families regarding the precautionary measures that we're taking on March the 6th as well, and then a robocall to the parents of the AWL students on March the 9th. On March 10th, we did another letter to the AWL parents. We also did a district-wide letter and a media release. On the 10th, we also did a staff robocall. On the 11th, all staff received the informational letter that you have, as well as the FAQ, which will also, or is also, already on our website. On March the 13th, which is on Friday, we are going to host 4 principal meetings. So we're not going to bring them over in large groups. We're going to bring them over in small groups. We're going to provide them all this information that's in this presentation, along with the written plan that we have for the entire district. That presentation will be given 5 times, 4 times for principals, and then once for directors. They will then take all this information back to their departments and their schools, and then they will have a school-wide or department meeting on Monday to give everyone accurate and up-to-date information about the virus, how it spread, what we can do to protect ourselves, and the communication methods that we are using. The PLT, we have also agreed to have a daily huddle, whether that's face-to-face or through Blue Jeans, which is the online video conferencing system that we use. Lastly, as I said, on March the 13th is when we will have our meeting with our principals and our directors, and we have a very detailed plan that identifies everything that should be done in terms of preparation, execution, and then recovery, and then staff meetings on March the 16th. And that concludes my very long report.
And thorough. Hands go up. Okay. Start with Ms. Bowers.
Thank you for that very informative and thorough report. I have a question just in regards to the possibility of schools being closed and for a maximum of like 8 weeks. Has there been any discussion with any I don't know, community, vendors, possibly partnerships on the effect that will have on a lot of our families who rely on our schools for 2 meals a day?
Yes, so let me just say, to go on the record, and I know that there are rumors about CPS closing for 8 weeks. I have no idea where that rumor is coming from. At no point in time have we talked about the district being closed. The health commissioner has said that she does not have any information that would indicate that she is recommending that we close. We have already, within our plan, a meal program to be able to help service those families should we have to close for an extended period of time. So yes.
Okay, I'm just going to go down the line. Mr. Messer?
Thank you. I just think it has to be stated, such an incredible update, very thorough, and rivals any of the major corporations that I've seen communication coming out from this week. So thank you for your leadership into the entire PLT, who I know has been on deck,
Yes.
late hours and
24
early
hours.
mornings, and making sure that things look as easy as they do here. So thank you to the entire PLT and to the superintendent. And I think just one thing that I think is fascinating through this whole thing, of course, you hear about something so scary and immediately think about the impact to children. And I think it's been shown multiple times, and it's worth reminding people that it doesn't seem like this virus has impacted children at all. And so not that doesn't mean it may not affect some of our staff members, et cetera. But some of the calls I was getting is, oh my gosh, our kids are going to get sick. And, actually that's not proven to be the case at all, which maybe will help us understand more about that virus long-term, just that one little factor. But definitely is a good thing for children, as we're in the children business.
Mr. Lindy?
Thank you. I want to echo what Ryan said to Superintendent Mitchell, that this feels incredibly comprehensive, and I had shared with some of my colleagues how much I appreciated the robocall on Friday night. Just that, proactively sharing with parents where we are. I thought it was just great, and thank you. I think I only have, Pam asked one question I had about the food issue. Thank you. The other one I had was, seems like the overall approach is don't close a school preemptively. Wait until we have evidence that there's either a confirmed case or a significant risk of a confirmed case. Can you, to the extent you're able, just share why that's the approach? I think the questions I'm getting are along that vein, which is like, why is it better to wait until we have a confirmed case?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that was the, this is the question I've been getting, and so I wanted to see if I could arm myself with good information to share about it.
Well, the superintendent can respond, but just a quick response. I think, what's out there in the media and on Facebook as well about other districts that have closed. And I know, so the question has been posed to me, what's wrong with CPS? Because Lakota is closed. Well,
Or the university is,
or the university is closed, so it's killing the rumor mill. So, I think that's part of it, but the superintendent can respond directly to your question.
Yes, so what the health commissioner said in her presentation yesterday is that when it's all said and done, there may be very few people, and so I'm even hesitating to say this, who will actually get the virus and who may actually die. And so even though there may be very few, it's important to those few and their families. I think that the thought is for us not to panic and not to go into mass hysteria. I do understand that many of the universities are closing their face-to-face instruction or courses on campus. We have not been advised by the health department, and we are taking our leadership from them. I haven't received a clear, definitive answer as to why wait, other than that there isn't the anticipation that this will lead to a lot of fatalities. and that we need to make sure that we're staying calm and that we're putting precautionary measures in place. I mean,
And
to be
I'll
honest with you,
just-
that's the best I can offer you.
I'll just share that from my perspective, I think that makes a ton of sense. Because I think the costs of disruption can be large. And not just in terms of inconvenience, but in terms of, childcare and coverage for kids and parents' jobs and all kinds. I mean, I think, I'd just like to share, I think this approach makes sense to me. And that's helpful in fielding a response from others. So, thank you.
Ms. Bolton, did you have a comment?
Yes, just a quick question or two. First of all, are we going to be, let's say we're fortunate and we stay open, and it certainly is my hope that we can, and I like the case-by-case, site-by-site approach, because I don't think we need to add to the panic, and very frankly, you can send college kids out to learn by themselves and take care of themselves, but for us to release all of our children for a significant number of days is actually more dangerous than perhaps the epidemic itself, knowing some of the situations that they're in. But regarding the Election Day effort,
Yes.
would you please address, I know we're
Yes.
already making remarkable plans about that, but I think that under these circumstances, we might need to be able to brief and even deepen that effort.
Yes, so just so you know, although we are not closing, we are taking this extremely seriously. So Monday morning, the PLT and I were on a video conference call. We then got back on another call on Monday night. We were together yesterday, and during our time together yesterday, we looked at the schedule of schools who are scheduled to have a voting poll in their building, and we looked at the master list of exactly where that voting poll is. We said we would be comfortable moving forward if there was easy access from the outside into a specific location, and they didn't go any further, and then we would be able to clean that location. And so we were looking at it, quite honestly, case by case. And we decided, I'm looking at Dan, that to move forward, there were about 3 or 4 schools that we had questions about, because it wasn't like the gym or a room that was right off of the outside of the building. But we decided to move forward with all of them.
Actually, we're down to 1 that we're still looking at, and Sarah and I just stepped out earlier to talk to David Allen from the Board of Elections. We have some follow-up at 1 school, but other than that, we're comfortable with all the other locations.
We will keep people contained in a specific area with security there, and then we will be able to sanitize that area and move forward.
I appreciate that. And then the other, if we get through these next couple of weeks, are we committing particular efforts or time and money and staff that over spring break, when the kids and staff are gone, that additional kinds of precautions or cleanings or whatever will be taking place during spring break?
Yes. So,
And our staff has the appropriate equipment
yes.
to do all of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they do.
That's good.
We are
Yeah.
quite honestly staying the course and getting to next Friday.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
If we can get to next Friday without any incidents, we'll be good, because then we'll be on spring break for a week.
And the last thing, if I
Yes.
could, real quick, it would be good, maybe this is an assignment, but it would be good to know exactly what authorities or which authorities, if any, would be able to supersede what we would want to be doing and would be in a position of ordering us to do something.
Yes.
And I don't know.
Let's formalize that, put
Is
it
it
in an
assignment?
assignment.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then finally, and this may be an assignment as well, but I became aware today that ABC's event was canceled tomorrow. There is an event on Friday at Withrow, the Women's Empowerment. I don't know, so that maybe I'll give that assignment and have our staff.
So I did call about that this
Okay.
morning, because I was scheduled to be there, and they plan to move forward with it. So the challenge is this. What's coming out of the governor's office is no more than 50 people. Well, that happens in all of our hallways
Yeah.
and our
Right.
lunchrooms every single day. It happens in schools. So what we're doing is looking at those items that fall outside of the
Okay.
school day.
Okay, Well, I'll see you there Friday, then I'll be
I
there.
won't be there because I'll be here doing emergency meetings with principals, going over all this information.
Okay,
And
thank you.
if I could just say one other quick thing. So we have a binder of memos, parent letters, and articles, and I appreciate the fact that Vice President Member Messer has been sending me Johnson & Johnson's protocol, which has actually been very happy. I've been very happy to receive that, to be able to point to not only other school districts, but what other organizations are doing, and that's been helpful, so thank you.
Thank you.
That
Okay.
concludes my unwritten.
Thank you so much. Again, we appreciate the work of the PLT, you and your PLT, to provide as much clarity to it. And also, for me, at least, I saw it on our website, which is, the information was extremely helpful. So the more we can do of that, I think the better for us. Yes, sir?
You know, I was just sitting here thinking that, you know, that was very affirming, that update. And I was wondering, is there a possibility that even a snippet of that could be posted and then be able to share and call it a community update from our superintendent at Cincinnati Public Schools? Because I think there are several points in there that we're getting different questions. I think what a great way to just say, here you go. And this is the update as of today. I think that could be a really great thing that would probably get shared tremendously in social media.
Great. Thank you. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the recommendations of the superintendent?
So moved?
Is there a second? Any discussion? Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers? Aye. Mr. Messer?
Aye.
President Jones?
Aye. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the revised report of the treasurer?
So moved?
Is there a second? Second, Ms. Bowers? Thank you. Any discussion? Ms. Bolton?
Just glad to see on page 4 regarding the purchase of the efforts at Woodward, safety equipment, trailer hitch installed in Cincinnati and what have you for the vehicle and what have you. It's great news.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Bolton?
Ms. Bolton.
I'm
She got
sorry.
it.
You all with these Bs. That's the
It's a law firm, Bates, Bolton, and Bowers.
I just have a question on
yes.
page 6 regarding the MORE and the Girls to Women's program. When it says understand and maximize the impact, is there a measurement used for that, or is that really focused on expansion of the program?
So with more in Girls to Women, we look at grades, we look at attendance, we look
Okay.
at discipline, and we also look at graduation as well as accepted into a career pathway. Several of our more men in previous years, I was trying to think 2 years ago, have received full rides to Miami, and now Miami is doing a program like that for our girls as well. And so we're really measuring on, are we getting our kids, are these programs getting our kids into a life after CPS, so the 3 E's.
Okay.
I just wanted to follow up with a comment. Again, at the Southwest event last night, which, by the way, next year, we all should go together as a team. We were outnumbered last night, but anyway, we represented for the district. But anyway, yeah, I have some information that I'll give to you, Superintendent, which really is a recognition of some of the programs, extracurricular programs that are succeeding in the districts. And so I'll give that, because I thought about MORE and the Girls and Pearls program, so I'll get that to you this evening. Okay. Ms. Wagner? Yes.
Before we do a roll call, I just wanted to then do an addendum to the superintendent's report on the virus, and that in addition to those plans, the treasurer's office is also making plans, updating our disaster recovery or disaster planning, so that we can, in the event that the Ed Center has to close for illness, we can still run payroll. And I will be submitting a plan on Monday for board approval There are some things that I would prefer to have the board give me authority to do before we have to do it, in terms of, for example, if schools close and they can't report, hourly people can't report their time, I don't want them not to get paid, so we're going to issue a standard hour work week paycheck, and then we'll reconcile differences after the fact. But I don't want to harm anybody financially because of this situation. So, but it would be helpful if I could have an authority in writing before an auditor slaps me on the hand for doing something they don't like.
Sure.
But we're looking at, how to run payroll remotely, how do we pay vendors, how are we going to reimburse parents for fees that we recover for canceled trips, how are we going to handle travel reimbursements and licensure issues, and so there's a whole host of financial implications that go along with these plans, and so we'll update you those on Monday.
Thank you. Yes.
Along those lines, too, if, and hopefully we don't have to, and I think it's right for the superintendent to keep emphasizing we have no intention unless forced to close for reasons because of illness. We do have to think about the hourly employees that would be harmed if indeed there is no school, as to whether or not they would continue to be paid. So I know they're thinking in terms of national legislation about that, and it would be great that, we don't have to wait for the nation to tell us to do it.
Yes. So I did receive an email from one of our unions regarding AWL in terms of some of their civil service, all the civil service not being able to come to work other than the custodians, and so they will be paid for that time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Wagner, please call the roll.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers? Aye. Mr. Messer?
Aye.
President Jones?
Yes, thank you. Are there any inquiries or updates? Ms. Bolton?
Yes, just a first one, because every time I see Bill Mooring's name, I think as a district, we have to spend money. But so I was thinking it was in the treasurer's report about his resignation, and I just, as one board member over time, wanted to thank Bill for his efforts and continuing efforts. I think it's been an invaluable employee and team player, and very colorful as well, quite often. So appreciate his service and hope we'll be able to use him as we ever need him, but it's great for his service as a firefighter and also for us. The other things are from Columbus. The State Board of Education on Tuesday at 1 o'clock unanimously passed the brand-new teacher evaluation system. And so in passing that, that's what's expected to be used next year, and indeed we've piloted parts of it here, as I understand, and more particularly one of the biggest testimonials that helped the passage was delivered by Kendra Phelps, CFT, I think educational issues person, and actually I think it's been written up in the record as stating very clearly why it would be, it's good and it's an improvement. The other is that the Education Standards Board also approved the new licensure code for professional conduct. Remember when the lady kept coming to talk about the professional code? She made presentations here and requested that she and her group would love to see it posted on our website. It's a thought, or even if it's an internal one, and maybe it already is, but it's a new one. And finally, also, there is going to be new standards issued for superintendents that have not been fully updated since 2008. So that'll be done for this coming school year by a committee of the Education Standards Board.
Thank you. Any other inquiries or updates? Okay, assignments. I think we had one, I believe the superintendent has already noted, to review the data regarding the SCPP status related to minority kids. Thank you. All right, anything else?
The second one that you suggested, or I suggested be an assignment, was for us to know legally what authorities have the capacity, if there is or are, to shut us down, even perhaps over our objection, or for what purposes.
Okay. Any other assignments? Okay. All right. I need a motion to recess into executive session to consider employment of a public employee or official, sale of property at competitive bidding, and security matters.
So moved?
Second? Is this roll call? Ms. Wagner?
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Mrs. Bowers? Mr. Messer?
Aye.
President Jones?
Yes. I declare the meeting adjourned.